Hi class, in lesson 15.3 you will be learning about line plots and stem and leaf plots, learning targets, organize data and interpret dot plots, and organize data and interpret stem and leaf plots. Key terms in lesson 15.3, dot plot, distribution, symmetric, skewed right, skewed left, clusters, gaps, and stem and leaf plot. Please turn to page 1020, problem 1, Victory at the Olympics, Pure Gold. The 2010 Winter Olympic Games were held in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. The Games featured 85 medal events over 15 sports. The table shown lists the number of gold medals and total medals won by various countries. Please answer number 1, letters A through C with your group members. For number 1, letter A, answers will vary. One conclusion that you could have come up with was that the United States won the most medals at the Winter Olympics, but Canada won the most gold medals. For letter B, the data are quantitative because they can be placed on a numerical scale. And for letter C, the data are discrete because each value is a count of how many medals were won. A country cannot win a half of a medal. One way to describe a set of quantitative data is by drawing a graphical display of the data. A dot plot, sometimes called a line plot, is a graph that shows how the discrete data is graphed using a number line. Dot plots help organize and display a small number of data points. In the dot plot shown, the number line represents the number of gold medals. Each X above a number represents the number of countries that won that specific number of gold medals. Please answer number 2, letters A through C with your group members. For number 2, letter A, the two X's represent 2 countries that won 9 gold medals each. For letter B, the two X's represent 2 countries that won no gold medals. And for letter C, there were no countries that won 8 gold medals. Please turn to page 1022. Let's create a dot plot to display the total number of medals won as listed in the 2010 Winter Olympics data table. You will refer back to the table on page 1020. Please answer letters A through C with your group members. For number 3, letter A, the title for your line plot or dot plot can be Total Medals Won at the 2010 Winter Olympics. For letter B, your number line will begin at 0 and will end at 40. You want to select a number above the highest data point and below the lowest data point for your number line. And for letter C, you will use intervals of 1 because if you use other intervals, there will be no place to mark X's for some data points. Please complete letter D with your group members. Here is what your dot plot should look like for letter D. Remember, we need to make sure that we have a title. We need to make sure that we have our number line labeled. We need to make sure that we have correct intervals on the number line, and we need to make sure that we have the correct number of X's over each number, in this case representing the number of medals won. Please turn to page 1023, problem 2, the shape of it all. When you analyze a graphical display of data, you can look at several characteristics of the graph to draw conclusions. By doing this, you can ask yourself some of the questions shown, such as, what is the overall shape of the graph? Does it have any interesting patterns? Where is the approximate middle or center of the graph? And what does the graph tell me about how spread out the data values are? The overall shape of a graph is called the distribution of data. The distribution is the way in which the data are distributed. The shape of the distribution can reveal a lot of information about data. There are many different distributions, but the most common are symmetric, skewed right, or skewed left. When the distribution of the data is symmetric, the left and right halves of the graph are mirror images of each other. There is often a peak in the middle of the graph, indicating there are many data values in the center of the graph. When the distribution of the data is skewed right, the peak of the data is to the left side of the graph. There are only a few data points to the right side of the graph. And finally, if the distribution of the data is skewed left, the peak of the data is to the right side of the graph, and there are only a few data points to the left side of the graph. Miko says that the dot plot shown in problem 1 for the number of gold medals won is skewed right. Please turn back to page 1021 and answer number 1 with your group members. For number 1, Miko's statement is correct because the peak of the data is on the left side of the graph with only a few values on the right side. This tells us that the majority of the countries won only a few gold medals and only a few countries won many gold medals. Please turn to page 1024. For number 2, examine the dot plot you created for the total number of medals won by the top 20 medal-winning countries back on page 1022. Answer number 2 with your group members. For number 2, this dot plot is also skewed right. The peak of the data is on the left side of the graph with only a few values on the right side. This is telling us the majority of the countries won only a few medals, while only a few countries won many gold medals. When analyzing a graphical display of data, you can also look for any interesting patterns. Some of these patterns include clusters, which are areas of the graph where data are grouped close together, or gaps, which are areas of the graph where there are no data. For number 3, examine the dot plot you analyzed for the number of gold medals won by the top 20 medal-winning countries back on page 1021. Please answer number 3 with your group members. For number 3, there is a cluster of data from 0 to 6 and another cluster from 9 to 10. This is telling us that most of the countries won 0 to 6 gold medals, and a few more won 9 or 10 gold medals. And there are gaps between 6 and 9 and between 10 and 14 medals. This is telling us that none of the countries won 7, 8, 11, 12, or 13 gold medals. Number 4 tells us to examine the dot plot you created for the total number of medals won by the top 20 medal-winning countries back on page 1022. Please answer number 4 with your group members. For number 4, there is a cluster of data from 3 to 11 and another cluster from 14 to 16. This is telling us that most of the countries won 3 to 11 medals and a few more won 14 to 16 medals. There are gaps between 16 and 23 and between 30 and 37 medals. This is telling us that none of the countries won 17 to 22 medals or 31 to 36 medals. This will conclude the first part of lesson 15.3 on understanding line plots. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.